I'm not proud of what I felt in that moment, the mix of shame, disbelief, and something colder than anger. But I need to say it the way it really happened. Because everything that followed started with a single vibration in my pocket. One text message, one sentence that stripped away 3 years of loyalty in 5 seconds. When we're done with him, I'll fire him and take the entire bonus. He won't see it coming. That message wasn't meant for me, but it landed on my screen, glowing like a warning light on a sinking ship. And for the first time in my adult life, I understood exactly how replaceable I was in the eyes of the man who smiled at me every morning. My boss, Michael, the guy who shook my hand when I hit my targets, who clapped me on the back for being reliable, who promised during every performance review that the company sees you, Evan. Trust me. Trust. You'd think I'd laugh when I saw the text, but I didn't. I just stood there in my tiny apartment kitchen, holding my phone like it was something toxic. Outside, the city hummed like it always does. Inside, something went silent in me. The kind of silence that tells you a line has been crossed, and there's no walking it back. I stared at the message again, making sure it was real. I'll fire him and take all the bonus. Not the bonus he doesn't deserve. Not, we need to restructure. No, he meant mine. The bonus I'd earned after 8 months of leading a project he'd barely even reviewed. The project he'd publicly taken credit for. The one that expanded our department's revenue enough for him to get a performance raise. The raise he'd told me wasn't in the budget for me. My phone buzzed again. Oops, wrong person. That was it. No panic, no explanation, just that. I didn't reply. People imagine betrayal as some dramatic explosion, but real betrayal is quiet. It settles into you like a slow-moving poison. You keep breathing, you keep blinking, but something inside you stops being naive forever. I didn't tell anyone, didn't slam doors, didn't write back. Instead, I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and went through the last year's email threads. I wasn't looking for revenge, not yet. I was looking for clarity, to understand exactly how long I'd been working under a man who saw me as a resource to drain and discard. Turns out, a while. There were things I'd ignored, little things. The way he would accidentally forget to CC me on decisions that originally came from my research. The way he positioned himself at meetings, always one seat closer to the director, always presenting my numbers as our findings. The way he handled praise like it was a resource he had to ration. And the worst part, I let it happen. I thought being humble was the same as being respected, that staying quiet made me a team player. That recognition would come later, after enough loyalty. But loyalty is a currency you shouldn't spend on people who treat it like pocket change. That night, I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m., I walked into my bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look angry. I looked awake, like I'd been living underwater for years and had finally surfaced. By morning, the exhaustion faded, but the clarity stayed. I knew one thing. Tomorrow at work, I would act normal. Absolutely, flawlessly normal. Because if Michael wanted to play a game, a dirty one, then I needed time. Time to get my footing. Time to prepare. Time to understand what he thought he knew about me and what he still assumed I was too blind to see. When I walked into the office, he greeted me the same way he always did. Morning, Evan. Big week ahead. I didn't flinch. Morning. He smiled. I almost admired how easy it was for him. How natural. I guess lying becomes a skill set when your entire leadership style depends on it. Throughout the day, he dropped hints, subtle ones, about reallocation, budget pressures, tough decisions. He even clapped me on the back after our team meeting and said, "You're a star, really. I don't say it enough." If I hadn't seen the message, I might have believed him. I opened my notebook, pretending to jot down action items, but what I actually wrote was this. He doesn't know I know, and that's my advantage. It was the first honest sentence I'd written in months. I made a decision that afternoon, Not out of anger, but out of something steadier. Self-respect. If Michael was going to treat my career like a chess piece he could sacrifice, then I wasn't going to let him keep playing the board alone. But that decision would have consequences. Some for him, some for me. And I didn't know it yet. But that night, the very night he thought he'd already won, was the night I stopped being the employee he could manipulate. It was the night I quietly, calmly began to take back everything he'd tried to steal from me. The next morning, the office felt different, but not because anything had changed. It was because I had. I walked in with the same coffee, same worn-out laptop bag, same quiet routine, but behind it all was a new awareness, sharp enough to cut through every conversation, and Michael, my boss, acted exactly like the kind of man who believed his decisions existed in a private universe, a universe where he was untouchable. He waved me into his office around 9:15. "Evan, quick sync?" His tone was cheerful in that rehearsed way, like he'd spent the drive rehearsing lines. I stepped inside. He pulled up a dashboard on his monitor, the project numbers I'd built from nothing. "Impressive work," he said. "Really is." Then he paused, giving himself room to pivot into what he actually wanted. "But leadership is considering some restructuring. You know, the economy, budgets, all that." I nodded slowly. "Restructuring." "Nothing final," he said too fast. "Just transparency." Transparency was the word he used when he wanted to hide something in plain sight. I kept my expression neutral and asked the one question he didn't expect. Should I be concerned? He looked at me for a fraction of a second too long. "No, no," he said. "Just normal business adjustments. You're safe." Safe. The same word he probably used in the text when he described firing me as casually as moving a meeting. Back at my desk, I opened my email and sent myself a copy of every document connected to my contributions this year. Timelines, approvals, raw data, version history. Not to weaponize anything, but because I already knew. If the company started restructuring, the only thing that would protect me was evidence. By noon, the irritation in me wasn't subtle anymore. It wasn't fire, just a low, steady burn of injustice that made everything sharper. Every comment from Michael suddenly carried weight. "Great job, buddy. We'll get you that recognition soon. I've been bragging about you to the directors." It wasn't praise, it was insulation. Words designed to keep me compliant until he flipped the switch. At 1:40 p.m., during our team meeting, he took over the slides I'd created. Not just presented them, claimed them. "So based on the analysis I did last quarter," he began. I looked at him. He didn't look back. For months, I'd told myself this didn't matter. As long as the work was good and people noticed in their own way, it was fine. But today, watching him talk like my ideas grew from the floor under his shoes, something inside me tightened. I realized how many times I'd mistaken silence for professionalism. After the meeting, one of our analysts, Lauren, caught up to me in the hallway. "Hey," she whispered. "Wasn't that your framework he presented?" I shrugged. "Does it matter?" She hesitated. "It does to you." I didn't answer, but she was right. Around 3 p.m., I noticed him walking in and out of the director's office, 3 times in 1 hour. Every time he came out, he looked lighter, almost smug. Something was happening behind those glass walls, something he was confident about. At 4:12, he returned to his desk, leaned back in his chair, and announced to the room, "Leadership wants the updated pipeline forecasts. First thing tomorrow. Tight turnaround, but we'll manage." "Tomorrow morning?" I asked. "That's a full rebuild." He spread his hands like a preacher. "We're a strong team. You're good under pressure, Evan. You always deliver." There it was. The setup. He wanted me working late so he could claim my results again, maybe even throw me under the bus for being slow during the restructuring. I sat down and opened a blank sheet. But instead of working, I watched him laugh with another manager, both of them leaning on my cubicle wall like I wasn't sitting right there. "That kid works too hard," the other manager joked. Michael smirked. "Not for long." It was quiet, almost too quiet, but I heard it, and something in me stopped giving him the benefit of the doubt. At 5:30, most people packed up. I normally stayed late, but today I closed my laptop exactly on time, stood up, and watched Michael's head snap toward me. "You heading out?" he asked, trying to sound casual but failing. "Yes, but we need the forecast." "I'll handle it in the morning," I said. "That's tight," he pressed. "We really need a head start." "Then you should get one," I replied, picking up my bag. He blinked, confused by resistance he wasn't used to. "We're a team, Evan." "We are," I said, which means tasks get shared. It was the closest I'd come to calling out his behavior, and for a split second I saw irritation flash across his face, the kind that appears when someone realizes their tool isn't responding correctly anymore. I walked out of the building, the air colder than it should have been for early fall. Something in me felt clearer than it had in months, maybe years. Not empowered exactly, but awake in a way I hadn't been before. I wasn't angry, I wasn't planning anything dramatic, but I'd finally stopped pretending the ground under my feet was stable. And as I reached my car, my phone buzzed with an email from HR. A meeting invite for Friday morning. No agenda, no description, just a room number. My reflection in the car window didn't look surprised, because somewhere deep inside I already knew that was just the beginning. Friday morning, I woke up before my alarm. The sky outside my window was still gray, the kind of color that makes you think the day hasn't decided what it wants to be yet. I had decided, though. The HR invite sat in my inbox like a quiet threat. No subject beyond meeting. Friday, 9:30 a.m. Location: small glass room on the third floor, the one they used for sensitive conversations. I'd only been there once before when they did yearly harassment training in tiny groups. Nobody joked in that room. People left either bored or rattled. My coffee tasted different that morning. Not worse, just sharper. I opened my laptop and pulled up the screenshot of Michael's text. Then I opened a blank document and started typing. I didn't write a rant. I wrote a report. Dates. Projects. Specific instances where my work had been relabeled as his. Times he had excluded me from calls about things I'd built. His jokes about me being too reliable to promote. The way he shifted blame downward when he missed deadlines. I attached emails showing he'd asked me to draft presentations for leadership, then sent those exact slides from his own account. I copied the timestamps on late-night requests and early morning demands. I pasted the message that changed everything. In a few days, I'll fire him and take all the bonus. He won't see it coming. And underneath it, I wrote, "This message was sent to me by mistake." At the top, I put a single line. "I am submitting a formal complaint regarding my manager, Michael, last name, for unethical conduct, retaliation planning, and misappropriation of credit and compensation." No adjectives, no insults, just facts. At 8:47 a.m., I attached the document and screenshot to an email to HR. Not just the general inbox, but to the HR manager whose name was on every policy slideshow. I added our department director in CC. In the subject line, I wrote, "Formal complaint, time sensitive." I hit send. Only then did I put on my jacket and head to the office. When I walked in, the usual buzz of keyboards and low conversations filled the air. Nobody looked at me differently. Michael was at his desk, leaning back in his chair, scrolling on his phone with the smug looseness of someone who thinks the script for the day is already written. "Big day," he said when he saw me. "You ready for your chat?" "Yeah," I replied. "You?" He laughed like I'd made a joke. "Don't worry, it's just HR stuff. Procedures. We'll go in together in a bit. Then I'll handle the heavy talking." That detail stuck with me. Together, he thought this was his show. At 9:25, he walked over to my desk, straightening his tie. "Let's head up," he said, voice lower, in that "I'm on your side" tone he used when he wanted compliance. We stepped into the elevator. It felt smaller than usual. "Just remember," he added, "these things are about business needs, not personal. I'll make sure they know you're a team player, whatever happens. Whatever happens. The door to the HR room was already open when we arrived. Inside, the HR manager sat at the table with a folder in front of her. Our director was there too, arms crossed, expression unreadable. That was new. Michael hesitated for half a second, then smiled. "Morning," he said, easy. "Glad we could all connect." "Have a seat," HR said. Her voice was neutral, but there was a tension under it I hadn't heard before. We sat. I placed my notebook on the table. Michael didn't notice. My hands weren't shaking. HR looked at me first, not at him. "Evan," she said, "we received your email." Michael's head snapped toward me so fast his chair creaked. "Your email?" I met her eyes. "Thank you for reading it." "What email?" he demanded, trying to keep his voice calm and failing. I thought this was about the restructuring proposal. She opened the folder. On the top was a printed copy of my complaint. Beneath it, the screenshot of his text, staring up at all of us like a confession. "This meeting," she said carefully, "was originally scheduled to discuss a potential departmental change. However, due to the nature of the information Evan sent us this morning, we are shifting focus. Michael will need to address the content of this message." She rotated the page so it faced him. Color drained from his face, slowly, like someone pulling a plug in a tub. "That's taken out of context," he said too quickly. "You wrote that you planned to fire him and take his bonus," the director said, voice flat. "What context are we missing?" Michael opened his mouth, closed it, then tried a new angle. "It was a joke. Dark humor. You know how I talk." "I don't joke about terminating employees," the director replied, "especially not in writing." HR folded her hands. "We also have concerns about the pattern described in Evan's email. Credit attribution, exclusion from meetings, and the timing of this restructuring. If you were planning to remove him shortly after he completed a high-impact project, that would be problematic." He turned to me like I'd stabbed him in the back. "You blindsided me," he hissed. "You texted me," I said quietly. "I just finally believed you." The room went still. For the next 20 minutes, HR asked questions. Calm, precise, thorough. They asked me to walk them through specific examples. I did. Dates and details laid out like tiles. They asked him to explain why my name didn't appear on certain presentations. His explanations were thin. He stumbled, contradicted himself twice. The director watched all of it with the steady focus of someone revising their entire understanding of a person. When HR stepped out to consult with legal, Michael rounded on me. "You really think this is going to end well for you?" he whispered. "You're making enemies you can't afford." I looked at him and felt something strange. Not fear, not guilt, just distance. The kind that appears when you finally see someone without any of the excuses you used to wrap them in. "You did that yourself," I said. "I just stopped covering it up with hard work." He scoffed, leaned back, exhaled through his nose like I was an ungrateful child. "You'd still be here in 5 years if you'd just kept your head down." "That was the problem," I replied. The door opened again. HR came back in, this time with a different energy. Focused. Final. "Michael," she said, "given the seriousness of the allegations and the evidence provided, we're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately, while we conduct a full investigation. You'll need to surrender your badge and company laptop before you leave the building today. IT access will be suspended as of this meeting." He stared at her like she'd switched languages mid-sentence. "You can't be serious." "This is standard procedure," she replied. "You know that." He looked at the director for backup. "You're okay with this?" The director didn't flinch. "I'm okay with doing this by the book, especially after reading that text." HR turned to me. "Evan, for the duration of this process, you will not report to Michael. We'll arrange interim oversight. We'll also follow up with you to gather any additional documentation. If you experience any retaliation or inappropriate contact from him or anyone else about this matter, you are to inform us immediately." I nodded once. Understood. They asked him to step out so they could wrap up logistics with me. Watching him stand up felt like watching a building realize its foundation is gone. He looked smaller somehow, not because I'd done anything spectacular, I hadn't. I just told the truth and refused to let it be ignored. At the door, he stopped and turned back toward me. "You think you won?" he said quietly. "You have no idea what you just started." He walked out before I could answer. HR closed the door behind him and exhaled. "I'm not going to comment on his statement," she said, "but I will say this. You did the right thing by bringing this to us before that restructuring meeting. The timing matters." My hands were finally shaking, just a little. The aftermath, not the act. "I don't want drama," I said. "I just want what I earned. And I want to stop being treated like I'm disposable." "That's exactly why we have these processes," she replied. "It may get messy for a while. Investigations usually do. People talk, rumors start. I'd advise you to stay factual and let this run its course." Messy, chaotic. Yeah, I believed her. For the rest of the day, the office felt like a shaken snow globe. People noticed Michael packing his bag early, HR walking him out. Conversations died when I approached. Slack lit up with little green dots and half-finished messages. Nobody said my name out loud, but I saw it in their faces. By 4 p.m., his name vanished from our internal org chart. Temporarily, sure, but visibly. They thought I'd be the one quietly escorted out, the restructured guy whose badge stopped working one random Friday. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. The following week felt strangely quiet, almost hollow. Not the kind of silence that makes you nervous, the kind that follows after something loud has finally stopped. Michael's chair remained empty. His screens were dark. His nameplate was still on the desk, but it looked like a tombstone someone forgot to remove. People walked past his office with the discreet caution of tourists, passing the place where something tragic happened. No one made jokes. No one asked me questions directly. But I caught the looks, careful, evaluating, mixed with a kind of slow-forming respect. Not admiration. Respect? The difference mattered. HR called me into a follow-up meeting on Tuesday. It wasn't in the small glass room this time. It was a regular conference room, sunlight hitting the table in clean slants. The HR manager, a legal rep, and our department director sat across from me. Their expressions were neutral, but not cold. "We've concluded the preliminary stage of the investigation," the HR manager said. "We want to update you on next steps." I nodded. I'd slept better that week than I had in months. She opened a folder. "First, the text message you provided is considered direct evidence of retaliatory intent. The surrounding documentation you submitted shows a clear pattern of misattributed work, inappropriate credit transfer, and exclusion from required communications. Combined, this is serious." The director leaned forward. "I'll be blunt, Evan. We were unaware of how much of our department's output originated from you. That's not how leadership is supposed to work. You've been carrying more weight than anyone realized." There was no triumph in hearing that, just a steady sense of something landing where it should have been all along. HR continued. "Michael is currently on an extended leave pending the full investigation. Based on what we have so far, termination is very possible, but legal needs to complete their part." Possible, not promised. That was fine. I didn't need the universe to punish him theatrically. I didn't need a scene. I just needed truth to follow its natural path. "And as for your role," she added, "we'd like to offer you interim ownership of the project pipeline you originally developed. This includes presenting directly to leadership next month. Additionally, the bonus you were slated to receive remains yours. There will be no changes to its distribution." My chest loosened in a way I didn't expect. It wasn't victory. It was simply fairness. Something that should never have been in danger in the first place. "We also want you to know," the director added, "that there are conversations about giving you a formal leadership track. Slowly, not rushed, but deserved." Slowly was fine. I trusted slow. Slow builds foundations. When I left that room, the hallway felt warmer. People weren't avoiding my eyes anymore. A few nodded. One analyst, Lauren, paused as I walked by. "Hey," she said quietly. "Good for you." It wasn't a celebration, it was acknowledgement. That meant more than applause. By Friday, the shockwaves had settled into routine. Systems got reorganized, project chains got rerouted. My inbox filled with genuine questions instead of orders disguised as favors. It was the first time I realized how much lighter work feels when no one is standing on your shoulders pretending to fly. That afternoon, as I packed up, the director approached my desk. "Quick word?" he asked. We stepped into a smaller conference room, not the HR one, just a space with a whiteboard and a pot of dying office plants. He sat, clasped his hands, and looked at me directly. "I want you to know something," he said. "People like Michael, they don't usually get caught because they're bold. They get caught because they assume nobody will ever challenge them. You refuse to let the narrative write itself." I didn't know what to say, so I said the truth. I just didn't want to lose everything I'd worked for. "That," he replied, "is exactly why you shouldn't have been on the chopping block in the first place. You didn't create this problem. You just refused to carry it quietly." He stood, offered a handshake, then added with a small smile, "Take Monday off, unofficially. Call it a reset." I did. Not because I needed rest, but because I needed a day that wasn't shaped by someone else's chaos. Monday morning, I woke up without an alarm. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and watched the neighborhood shake off the early cold. I checked no work emails. I didn't think about strategy. I didn't rehearse conversations. For the first time in a long time, my mind wasn't occupied by defense. It was just calm. Not the fragile calm of denial, the grounded calm of someone who stood up at the right moment and didn't break. Around noon, I drove to the park near my apartment, the one I always passed but never stopped at because work always felt too loud in my head. I walked without direction, without pressure. The air was crisp. Kids shouted near the swings. Someone's dog chased leaves like they were made of gold. Normal life. Life that keeps going whether or not you're fighting battles in conference rooms. I sat on a bench and let myself admit something I hadn't said out loud yet. I wasn't angry at Michael anymore. He'd made his choices. I made mine. The consequences simply aligned with their natural weight. Late that afternoon, an email arrived from HR. Not urgent, just informational. Status update. Michael has been formally removed from all managerial responsibilities, effective immediately. Final determination pending. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. It wasn't satisfaction in his downfall. It was satisfaction in stepping out of his shadow. The next week at work, I presented the updated pipeline to leadership. My name was on every slide. People listened, really listened, and asked questions that assumed I had authority, not permission to speak. When the meeting ended, the director clapped me on the shoulder. "Good work," he said simply. This time those words didn't feel borrowed. They felt earned. That evening, walking to my car, I realized something. The story wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about reclaiming the ground beneath my feet, about refusing to let someone rewrite my worth because it suited their ambition. People think justice is dramatic. Raised voices, slammed doors, lawsuits, and fireworks. But sometimes justice is quiet, professional, procedural, signed with black ink on white paper. And sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't seeing someone fall. It's watching yourself stand. As I drove home, the sun dipped low enough to turn the buildings gold. My phone sat in the console, silent. No threats, no manipulation, no hidden agendas waiting beneath polite messages. Just silence. The good kind. The kind you get when the noise you've lived under for too long finally stops. When I opened my apartment door, I set my keys on the hook, the same spot where this whole spiral began. I made dinner slowly, the way you cook when you're not rushing to get ahead of someone else's expectations. I sat at my table and let the day settle. Nothing pulled at me. Nothing demanded anything. For the first time in years, life fit. Not perfectly, not magically, but honestly. Years from now, if anyone ever asks me how I won, I won't talk about the investigation or the meetings or the evidence. I'll tell them the truth. I didn't win by fighting him. I won by refusing to be the version of myself he counted on. I won by choosing clarity over fear. And when the moment came, I stepped out of his shadow and never looked back. He thought firing me would make space for his bonus. Instead, it made space for my life. And now there were no questions left.